Good afternoon. Welcome to today's edition of the Coal Scene. I'm Chris Hamilton. I'll be your host over the course of the next half hour. Joining me in the studio today is Mr. Bill Rainey, President of the West Virginia Coal Association. And Bill's come by the studio here to talk about severance taxes and some of the other liabilities that are placed on active coal production around the state. Bill, good afternoon.
Good. Thanks for having me, Chris. It's always good to be here.
Well, always good to get you on here every couple months or so and kind of get an update on the industry and see where things are and what some of the current topics are. And today, I understand we're going to be talking about severance taxes, a topic which you presented to the legislature earlier this week.
We talked to them on Monday about that, and we've got some slides here with us today and talk about that, and just the fact that we're way out of step with the other coal-producing states, and we got to do something to get ourselves back in line with that.
No question about that. Listening to your presentation, it occurred to me that, and I think most people know that production is up just a little bit here within the state after, experiencing somewhat of a downward trend for a long period of time under the last federal administration.
Well, that's right. We went from 2008 to 2016 and lost right at 80 million tons of production. So you figure out 80 million tons of anything's a bunch of stuff. And you apply a 5% tax to it, and then you can see where some of the budget woes came from. We're building back up. We're running about 10% ahead last year compared to 16. And this year, year to date, we're running about 2.5–3% ahead year to date on production. So it's moving in the right direction. There's no question about that.
A lot of questions everywhere you go. People want to know, how coal's doing, obviously, and everybody, they're seeing coal trucks once again on some of the smaller secondary roads. Yeah. People are seeing coal barges and coal trains that they haven't seen for a while. So all that, a lot of visual signs on how the industry's doing that people become accustomed to.
Yeah, a lot better than it has been. No question about that. So, yeah, it's good.
So. And it comes at a time when, it seems to be, there seems to be a lot of positive things going on around the state. We hear Governor Justice talk about the improved economy. We see it in manufacturing. Oil and gas is doing a little better.
It is. And today they talked about, I think he said that tourism dollars were greater than they have been for the last half dozen years here in West Virginia. So that's moving in the right direction, and I think it's a very positive thing. I think Governor Justice has got all of that headed in a very positive direction, and there's a good attitude out here between he and President Trump. Then certainly in our industry, everybody's attitude's a whole lot better. So, looking at it, but at the same time, while our production's increasing, the predominance of that, as you well know, Chris, is come from export. And, we sell West Virginia coal in, I think, about 26 countries across the world. And, it's good that the market's so strong, but it runs in deep dips and steep inclines. So when you're running on the high ground, you got to make enough money to hope you can get through the valleys that are just most assuredly going to come, or historically they have been there. We hope it lasts a long, long time, but Our challenge here is domestic thermal, selling coal to American power plants to make electricity.
Well, you wouldn't think that'd be a challenge or such a challenge. It's always challenging in mining or manufacturing. When you're involved with a commodity and have a global sales unit, it's always going to be, you're always going to be experiencing the ups and downs of those cycles. So it's export coal that's doing a little better. Coal that we mine, that we export predominantly for steel production.
Right. Yeah, it is. And our domestic thermal production and shipment and market has been stronger compared to 16 to 17, and the export metallurgical market has been even better. And, we got the best coal in the world, the best coal miners in the world. So, we got everything. We're close to the ports. We can get to the East Coast easier than any other coal-producing state. But we're still out of step with all this severance tax. And we're 5%. Nobody around us Well, Ohio's got a 10 cent a ton, and Kentucky's got a little 4.5%, which is almost the same as ours, but they don't mine nearly as much coal. They have no metallurgical coal to speak of over there. And so when you look at metallurgical coal in southern West Virginia and even northern West Virginia, we can get to the coast a whole lot quicker than any of the other states. And we just got to get ourselves, anything we can do to balance out our ability to compete with these other coal-producing states is going to be a benefit, because we think that then translates into more people working, more coal, more tons produced. And if we produce more tons, then you got more taxes coming in. So somewhere in there's that magic threshold that you figure out just exactly, okay, we're going to reduce the taxes, but we're going to produce more coal, so thereby going to try to achieve a revenue neutral posture of some sort.
You know, when the industry's doing well, as we've experienced several times throughout the past 25 years, it seems like everybody in the entire state does well, and you don't pay as much attention to some of those, things such as your severance rate, that's a little bit of out of step from your neighboring rates.
That's true.
When we're mining lots of coal and selling it for high dollar, you can incur some additional cost that you don't necessarily see on the ledger.
Well, you
sheet.
do, and you know the industry as well as anybody in the country, so you know how impatient everybody is in the industry. So you get going, the price is good, the demand's there, and they want the tons of coal, and they're willing to pay a good price for it. So say, okay, well, will you pay another fee for it? Well, yeah, I'll pay another fee now. Well, when the price is up and you're getting good money for your coal, then it becomes a little less visible to you. And then all of a sudden the bottom drops out of the market and you're going, whoa, wait a minute here. We're paying so much in taxes, so much in fees. And so we're trying to look all across the good and bad times, and let's try to equalize this thing. And, a lower severance tax will help exports because it will free up money for the companies to invest in new equipment, which we certainly need. I mean, we've not had any major reinvestment across the industry for about 25 years. So we truly do need to get new equipment and increase our efficiencies. And that will help as well.
And you're competing again in that global market and against countries that have some advantages.
Yes.
Australia, for instance, I was reading, is one of the leading export countries, and they seem to mine coal cheaper, and their transportation costs are a lot less than what ours are here.
That's right. Well, they're so much closer to some of the bigger markets. It's no wonder that it's cheaper, and they got the same kind of mining conditions, same quality of coal almost. We still think our coal's a little better, but it takes a little longer to get it there. And certainly if it takes longer, it means it's going to cost more to get it there.
Then you have some of the other countries that I don't think we compete with in any other aspect of our life, but for the coal industry, places like Indonesia and Colombia.
Right. Yeah.
No one competes with them, but for the coal industry.
That's right. Well, from us.
Coal.
And when Dr. Deskins did his report for you and UMWA, the coal forum, it shocked me to find out that we as an industry make up 45% of everything that's exported out of West Virginia. And I had no idea that it was that big a majority of things. I thought there was a whole bunch of other things that were exported from West Virginia, and we were a lesser percentage, but that's almost half of everything that leaves this state to go to another country.
That's remarkable. The point where I was going with the Colombia or Indonesia competitiveness is, they don't have the operational standards, they don't have the environmental standards or permitting standards that we have here. And I read not too long ago, I don't know if it still exists, but I think it was areas in Colombia that produce coal were still relying on child labor.
Yeah, I think it's a wild, wild west out there in some of them. I mean, there's no regulation, and there's clearly none that come anywhere close to what we do here in America.
No.
So that's So
and again, that's not to suggest that we drop our standards. It's just to observe that there's a lot of places that we compete with don't have many.
That's exactly right. No one's advocating that we weaken anything, but we do. If there's something that we can do to get ourselves more competitive, for instance, we're losing market share in the North Carolina electric plants that used our coal over the years, and we're losing that market to Pennsylvania coal. And the reason is that Pennsylvania has no severance tax. And in some cases, we're losing, like in Ohio plants, we're losing to Illinois. So, they've spent 25 years putting control technologies on all these plants so they can use high sulfur, low sulfur. It makes no difference. Whereas it used to be southern West Virginia, East Kentucky, and Virginia low sulfur coal. They can use all kinds now. So Illinois has no severance tax. Pennsylvania has none. They're high sulfur coal places. And these plants can use it, and they're going to buy heat, and they're going to buy it as cheap as they can. And at 5% of the selling price, when you got a $60 ton of coal, then you're going to be paying $3 more here than you would in Pennsylvania. So somehow we've got to look at all that and get the numbers to work out. We don't want to jeopardize the budget. I mean, we want to try to reach revenue neutrality, and we think we can do that by seriously looking at the budget in a lot of different places across the state, looking at places that are not taxed today that perhaps probably should be. And we're not in the habit of suggesting someone else be taxed and not us. So we don't really want to get into that too much, but it's looking at the broad scheme of things and how can we keep our 14,000 coal miners working over the next 20 years.
Like you said earlier, you will likely save jobs, you will likely preserve jobs as well by lower. You're not. I didn't hear you say do away with the severance tax.
No.
I heard you say just make some reductions that are reasonable, sensible.
Right.
That would still keep West Virginia's tax level and the severance rate higher than every other state we're competing with right now.
That's right.
As it relates to northern steam coal anyway.
Yeah.
Even southern steam coal.
Yeah. 2%. 2%'s higher in Pennsylvania, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio. So that's, that's where we are, and those are the ones that we're competing with head on head.
Well, I understand you brought some slides. Maybe we can take a look at a couple of those and just restate some of the points that's been made so far. Maybe it'll lead us in another area or two. But I think this first one is just a general, status report. You indicated we're making some gains, but unfortunately, it's not across the board. It's just very much restricted in the export market.
Yeah. Well, and this is, you've done this, you're part of the Coal Forum, and the United Mine Workers and the industry joined together for this study that was done by WVU. And just to show the significance of the industry today, because ever so often you'll run into somebody and say, well, the industry's dying and it doesn't have near the impact that it used to. And when you look at what it did in calendar year 17 and you're 18% of the state's overall economic output, that's a pretty good lick.
That's in its current profile, in its current smaller, much smaller
last
size.
Calendar year, 2017. So, and as we said, the production's increased, but at the same time, that's an export market thing. The real challenge is in the thermal market here in this country. And the reason for that is that, our coal's more expensive, so when it goes to a power plant, it costs them more to buy our coal. It costs them more to make electricity with our coal, and when it gets ready to be dispatched, it's higher priced, and it's not being dispatched in the volume that we would like for it to be. So that.
Now you're way too technical for most of our viewers, and when I looked at some of those case studies, it showed that West Virginia coal was being squeezed out of the market in areas, North Carolina and Kentucky and places, by just a few cents.
That's right.
I mean, it's not like, there's tens of dollars.
No, it's not. And, and I don't know how the grid works, but I'm told that, they get online and they'll bid these things in and they'll buy a megawatt hour for a certain amount. And if it's more expensive here than it is in North Carolina, they're going to go to North Carolina and buy it. We're hoping we're selling coal to them, but what's happened over the last couple of years is we're not selling nearly as much coal to those guys as we used to because it's coming out of Pennsylvania now and it's cheaper. So
I thought another important point you made to the legislature the other day, Bill, was that you know, if there's a little bit of savings from a decrease in tax, you know, that'll go right to these at the point of where that coal is consumed. It won't go back to the operators.
that's right.
But it will go to the power in the process of securing contracts and coal purchases.
Right.
And it'll basically go to the utilities, so they'll be able to generate electricity from that coal at a much cheaper rate.
That's right. And there gets into the dispatch. When you talk about dispatch, it means sending the electricity out of the plant to whoever wants it. So, you know, and they're wanting to do it as cheaply as they can. So, and this circle graph here shows that the biggest chunk of our production is thermal coal, or coal that's used to make electricity, either in the industrial sector or residential sector. And that's where our real threat and challenge is with more than half of our coal. And that's why we're talking about trying to reduce at least the taxes is something that we can do quickly here.
You know, this slide also reveals a dimension of coal mining that can't be replaced. It's the opposite of thermal. It's the 49% that's not thermal here.
Yeah.
You know, that's, of course, you got a little bit of thermal being exported, not very much, but the metallurgical coal that we have, that we produce basically for steel manufacturing, that cannot be replaced by renewable energy forms or natural gas. You know, you have to have met coal for coking purposes to make steel.
Yeah, and I was told today that, you know, they're building these gas plants, and it's about $1 billion to build a gas plant. So if you want to replace a coal plant that's operating really good, like John Amos down in the river here, or Pleasance, that, you know, is getting ready to close, then you got to build about 3 gas plants. Well, then you look across who's buying electricity. Well, the people here in West Virginia are buying it, our residents. So you're gonna tack a $3 billion bill on top of that. So use the plant we've got, put new engines in it. Let's get some kind of initiative where they can put new boilers in it. And then let's start using more West Virginia coal in West Virginia to make electricity.
And the big and there is, and you keep all those 15,000 coal miners working.
That's right, yeah. Yeah, because behind that coal plant is usually a coal mine that has at least 200 or 300 coal miners working, supplying it, because they'll use 3 to 4 million tons of coal, and so you need that many coal miners. You got a gas plant. I don't know whether you got anybody back there at the gas well or not. You got somebody checking on it, but it's labor intensive, and it's very, very important that we have everything we can to keep our miners working.
Boy, no question about it. Additional slides. There's an interesting one here. This shows the amount of thermal coal that was consumed in 2008. Fast forward to this year, and boy, what a significant reduction. And I guess that's throughout the country.
Yeah, I mean, it's 230 million tons. It's been lost over that period of time, and that's a 10-year period. And you think about that, and that's a whole bunch of production. Now, a lot of it came out of the West, of course, but a substantial amount of that came out of the East. The losses were here in the East. And here's the reason, because we used to send coal to 165 power plants across the region. And this year, we're down to 51 plants that are accepting West Virginia coal. So, I mean, it's just a real challenging market that's almost invisible to everybody, because the electricity is getting out there. It's just the fact that it's not being made by as much West Virginia coal. And this shows you, again, graphically, the significant reduction. And it's more than half, about 52 million tons of production lost in the thermal coal production that we've done.
Don't want to get too political here today, but that's about the time that the previous president took office, and it's no secret. He said he was going to put coal miners out of work, and wanted to, ratchet down the amount of coal that we consume here, and it appears he did a pretty good job.
That's right. Yeah, he did. Yeah, did way too good a job. That's exactly right. But and we're trying to build back now, and and here's more plants that are closing. You can see they're in Maryland and Ohio, Pennsylvania, They're good customers of ours, so when you start losing those and they use 3 to 5 million tons of coal, then it starts to mount up and it accumulates pretty quickly. And you know, everybody talks about renewables and, you know, what happened. You need to look out back and see you got a 60-day pile of coal, and you know you're going to have 2 months of electricity. And you don't have to worry about whether the sun shines or the wind blows or whether that pipeline is hooked up or not. And that's the good thing about using coal. So
very reliable, very dependable.
It is.
I don't think there's any question about that. There seems to be greater emphasis being placed on homeland security today too. And when you talk about, I know I've heard the governor say on multiple occasions that, you know, he believes there should be a certain level, and the president's even talked about this, President Trump, that there should be a certain percentage of baseload generation that's preserved for anti-terrorism and for national security purposes.
That's exactly right. Yeah, they use the Defense Act and use the Energy Act and what is referred to commonly as 202C. And the president's working on that through the Department of Energy, and we clearly need that. I mean, you think about it, if you've got a single means of delivering the fuel to a power plant, and if it's the sun, if it's the wind, if it's a pipeline, and you have interruptions, if you have a coal power plant, I can get it by river, I can get it by rail, I can get it by truck, and if you have to, I guess you can carry it in 5-gallon buckets, but you know, there's
a lot of redundancy.
Absolutely.
Built into the coal infrastructure. You know, if you live next to a power plant today, or if you did a few years ago, and like the Pleasants, you know, there's been a lot of uncertainty up in Pleasants County with the Pleasants plant over the last 6 months, and people around the community are very much aware of those happenings and developments, you know, because if you have a plant there, likely that a couple hundred people from nearby communities work there. Yeah. And you know whether, you know, there's talk about the plant closing or it's going to continue operating. Yeah. But you have no reason to know what's going on with a plant 50 miles away. But you do, and you understand that there's been hundreds of these plants close over the past 6, 7 years now.
400 plants, 600 units, you know, like Amos has 3 units, so, you know, but you got 400 John Amoses out there that have closed across this country. And
that's amazing. I mean, you know, again, there's no reason for the average person to know that. No. But that's another reason your market has a big hole in it.
It does.
And has shrunk the way it has here over the past 10 years.
Yeah, and 6 of those were in West Virginia.
Yes.
So, you know, we've had the impact here, but the majority of our coal is sold outside West Virginia. And that's why our big concern about all of this and why we've got to get ourselves in line with the other states that produce coal.
Yeah, back to the Severance. Are there more slides here? You know, mine operators have done a pretty good job, and they've been forced to do some of it with terms of you know, scaling back things and becoming a lot more efficient. They've had to change mine design and their whole 5-10 year planning cycle. You know, because of the curtailment of production and loss of jobs. Right. The legislature here has worked pretty hard with the governor, cutting back unnecessary regulations to try to ease some of the regulatory burden and unnecessary costs. Yeah. And it's still, you know, we've done everything. We're pretty mean and lean, have done everything humanly possible to try to remain competitive in these different markets. But you got a market that's much smaller today. Yeah,
about a third.
And we still have our surrounding states wanting to mine as much coal and sell as much as we do. And if they don't have any severance, I mean, you can clearly see what a 5% rate on West Virginia coal does.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's, yeah. Well, they've always said that, you know, the same coal seam will run right across the state line up north into Pennsylvania, that there's a $4 advantage to mining the coal and producing and trying to market the coal that comes out of Pennsylvania as compared to West Virginia. So, we've got to look at that, because all the numbers, the things that we showed them on Monday, and we've got more of those kinds of things. The challenge is out there, and we've got to look not tomorrow, not next week, but we got to think about next year and the year after that and the year after that. And it just continues to go, because these plants are getting older. They need new boilers. We've got to figure out an incentive there. We need to figure out how to get investment made in West Virginia as compared to these other states. And we've got to get ourselves equaled out here with the severance tax. We're not saying get rid of it, as you said earlier. We're talking about getting it down to where we feel like we can compete.
You know, if you reduce our tax rate from 5% to 2%, that's cutting it over half, but it's still, twice that in what you'll find in Pennsylvania, Illinois, or Indiana.
Right. That's exactly right. Yeah, I mean, we still are way ahead, and try to make up the difference, which we are confident it'll happen. It won't happen quickly, but over the course of a year or two, we feel like that we can achieve that revenue neutrality.
John Deskins was here a couple months ago, and he indicated that our future production and employment levels should maintain about where they are today. Now, he provides some ranges, so I guess that things like what we're talking about here would depend on whether it ultimately falls out in the higher part of that range or the lower part.
Well, hopefully he's right about that, and we hope the price maintains. We hope the strength of the export market is there, and about half the coal that leaves America comes from West Virginia. So we're hopeful that all these countries that have tried the renewables and are moving back to coal, and India wants to put a light bulb in everyone's home, and the same with China and many of the provinces over there. So we hope that maintains. We continue to have a very strong export market, because like I said, we can get to the port quicker than anyone else in terms of a coal-producing state. So we got to work with the railroads, and they've got to get everything lined up so we can get this coal to where it needs to be.
Bill, that's just a great concluding comment there. We are all out of time today, and appreciate so much you coming by. It does go quickly. It always goes quickly when you're on here providing your insight and knowledge, and we appreciate that. And we want to thank you for tuning in to the Library Television Network's Coal Seam, and congratulations to the television network for celebrating its 40th year of operation this year. Have a good day.